When God doesn't want you with someone, He doesn't always speak in a loud voice or send an angel to tell you to walk away. More often than not, He speaks through circumstances, through the little things that start to unravel, the moments that make you stop and question if this is really meant to be. At first, you might try to ignore it. You tell yourself, this is just a rough patch, or every relationship has struggles. But deep down, something feels off. And no matter how hard you try to hold things together, disruptions begin to surface. It starts with miscommunication. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly now feel forced, filled with misunderstandings and unresolved tension. It's as if you're speaking two different languages, unable to truly connect. Plans that used to work out so smoothly suddenly begin to fall apart for no logical reason. You try to meet, but something always comes up. You attempt to have meaningful conversations, but distractions get in the way. The effort you used to put in doesn't yield the same results, and you begin to feel the weight of trying to force something that no longer aligns. And then there are the small inconveniences, the ones that seem insignificant at first, but keep happening over and over. Missed calls, unexpected delays, a sudden shift in energy between you. It feels like the universe itself is resisting this connection. But in reality, it's God stepping in. He's allowing these disruptions to show you that this relationship isn't where you're supposed to be. Because when something is divinely aligned, it doesn't feel like an uphill battle at every turn. There will be challenges, but they won't be rooted in chaos and confusion. The hardest part is admitting that the signs are there. Because sometimes you want it to work so badly that you start making excuses. You tell yourself it's just bad timing, or maybe I need to try harder, but deep in your soul you already know. God is speaking through the disruptions, through the frustration, through the moments of doubt. He's showing you that His plan for you is different, that He is leading you away from something that could break you rather than build you. And if you don't listen, the disruptions will only intensify, because God loves you too much to let you settle for something that isn't meant for you. So instead of resisting, instead of trying to hold on to something that's slipping through your fingers, ask yourself, is this truly from God, or am I forcing what was never meant to be? Because the moment you surrender, the moment you trust His redirection, is the moment you free yourself to receive something far greater. When God doesn't want you with someone, He doesn't just show you through external circumstances. He speaks directly to your spirit. That uneasiness you feel deep inside, that subtle but persistent feeling that something isn't right, that is God trying to get your attention. It's not always loud, and it doesn't always come with immediate clarity. But over time, if you're willing to be honest with yourself, you'll realize that your spirit is in conflict with what your heart desired. At first, it may feel like nervousness or overthinking. You tell yourself, maybe I'm just scared of commitment, or maybe I'm being too critical. But there's a difference between natural relationship jitters and the kind of inner unrest that won't let you be at peace. When a relationship is from God, there is an underlying sense of security, even in difficult times. But when God is trying to pull you away, your spirit will feel unsettled, no matter how much you try to silence it. You'll notice that prayer feels different. Instead of feeling reassured after seeking God, you feel more uncertain. Instead of gaining clarity, you feel resistance. And sometimes you even avoid praying about it altogether because deep down, you already know the answer. That hesitation is a warning sign. It's a sign that your spirit is wrestling with what your flesh desires. And the truth is, God doesn't compete for your attention. He won't force you to listen, but He will allow you to experience the consequences of ignoring that internal warning. Maybe you'll find yourself constantly second-guessing your emotions, struggling to feel completely present in the relationship. Maybe you'll notice that your joy is inconsistent, that your peace feels disrupted, and the longer you ignore it, the heavier it becomes. But here's the thing. God isn't trying to punish you. He's not trying to deprive you of love. He's trying to protect you from something that will ultimately steal your joy, your time, and your purpose. He sees what you cannot. He knows what's ahead. And that uneasy feeling in your spirit is not something to ignore. It's an invitation to trust Him, to surrender, to allow Him to guide you toward what is truly meant for you. Because when it's right, you won't have to convince yourself. You won't have to force peace where there is none. God's best for you will come with a deep sense of alignment, not confusion. So if your spirit is uneasy, if something inside of you is resisting, pay attention. That might just be God's way of saying, this is not for you. When God doesn't want you with someone, He will create obstacles that force you to pay attention. At first, they may seem like minor inconveniences, misunderstandings, scheduling conflicts, or small disagreements. But over time, they begin to form a pattern. You start noticing that no matter how much effort you put into making the relationship work, something always seems off. There's a resistance that you can't quite explain. And that resistance, that's not just bad luck or coincidence. That's God redirecting you. You see, when God ordains a relationship, there is a natural flow to it. Not that it will be perfect or without challenges, but the foundation will be stable, communication will be clear, peace will be present. But when you're trying to hold on to someone who isn't meant for you, the road will feel exhausting. You'll find yourself constantly drained, constantly questioning, constantly trying to force things into place. And the more you ignore the signs, the harder it becomes. Sometimes God allows these obstacles to show you that no matter how much love or effort you invest, this is not where you are meant to be. He's trying to save you from heartbreak before it fully consumes you. But because we are human, we resist. We try to fix things. We convince ourselves that with more patience, more understanding, more sacrifice, we can make it work. And that's where we struggle the most. Because we start operating out of our own will instead of surrendering to God's. You might notice that your plans with this person never seem to align. Maybe every time you try to move forward, something holds you back. Maybe your family and friends have concerns, or maybe there's an ongoing cycle of breaking up and making up. These aren't random. These are signals from God, warning signs that you should not ignore. God is not a God of confusion. If He intends for someone to be in your life, He will create alignment. But when He doesn't want you with someone, He will allow conflict to rise so that you don't settle for something that will ultimately break you. And the more you fight against His will, the more difficult things become. So if you find yourself constantly facing resistance in a relationship, stop and ask yourself, is this God trying to tell me something? Am I holding on to something He is asking me to release? Because the longer you hold on, the more painful the process of letting go will be. And trust me, when God removes something from your life, it is always because He has something greater in store. When God doesn't want you with someone, one of the clearest signs is the lack of peace in your heart. It's that constant unease, that lingering doubt that no matter how much you try to ignore it, never really goes away. You pray about it, you seek clarity, and yet deep inside, something feels unsettled. That's not an accident. That's God whispering to you, nudging you, telling you that this relationship is not aligned with His plan for your life. You see, when a relationship is from God, there is a divine peace that covers it. Not a peace that means there won't be challenges, but a peace that reassures you that even in the challenges, this person is meant to walk with you. But when you're with someone who isn't meant for you, no matter how much you try to convince yourself otherwise, your spirit will not rest. You will always feel like something is off. And sometimes that feeling isn't even tied to anything specific. It's just a knowing, a quiet voice that keeps telling you, this isn't it. But here's what often happens. We silence that voice. We rationalize. We tell ourselves that every relationship has struggles, that maybe we're just overthinking, that we're expecting too much, and yet every time we try to move forward, there's resistance. Every time we try to feel secure, something disrupts that security. And this is where we make the mistake of confusing attachment with purpose. Just because you're attached to someone doesn't mean they are your destiny. Just because you've invested time, emotions, and effort doesn't mean God has ordained this relationship for your future. And when God doesn't want you with someone, He will allow that lack of peace to increase. What used to be small discomforts will grow into deep frustrations. Conversations will feel forced. You'll feel drained rather than strengthened. And the more you try to force it, the more restless your spirit will become. Because God is trying to get your attention. He's trying to protect you from the pain that will come if you continue to ignore the signs. God's love is not just about bringing the right people into your life, it's also about removing the wrong ones. And sometimes He removes them by making you so uncomfortable that you have no choice but to walk away. So if you are feeling that lack of peace, don't dismiss it. That feeling is God's way of telling you that He has something better, something greater, something that will not require you to beg for love, for clarity, or for security. When it's from God, you will know, because peace will confirm it. When God doesn't want you with someone, one of the most painful yet revealing things that will happen is that your prayers about them will go unanswered. You will pray for peace, but find more confusion. You will ask God to bless the relationship, but instead you will see more obstacles, more frustration, more uncertainty. And it's not because God isn't listening, it's because He's answering in a way you may not expect. Sometimes God's silence is His loudest response. We tend to believe that if we pray hard enough, if we just have enough faith, God will fix the relationship. But the truth is, when something is not His will, no amount of prayer can force it to be. God will not bless what He has not ordained. He will not make something right that is fundamentally wrong for your life. And so instead of opening doors, He allows them to close. Instead of making things easier, He allows them to become harder. Not because He wants you to suffer, but because He wants you to see that this is not the path He has for you. And yet, many of us ignore these signs. We keep praying, hoping that maybe if we just hold on a little longer, things will change. But here's something you must understand. Unanswered prayers and relationships are often a form of divine protection. When God doesn't give you what you want, it's because He's preparing you for what you truly need. He sees the heartache that you cannot yet see. He knows the future that you are not yet aware of. And so, instead of answering your prayers the way you expect, He redirects them. He allows you to feel that emptiness, that frustration, so that you will finally surrender and trust Him. And this is the hardest part, letting go of the idea that just because you love someone, they are meant for you. Love is not enough if God is not in it. A connection is not enough if it's leading you away from your purpose. And sometimes God's greatest act of love is withholding what you think you want so He can give you what you truly need. So if your prayers about someone keep going unanswered, if you find yourself begging God for clarity but only feeling more confused, take a step back. Instead of asking God to change them, ask Him to reveal the truth. And when He does, have the courage to accept it. Because when God removes someone from your life, it is always for a greater purpose. When God doesn't want you with someone, one of the most telling signs is that your spirit feels restless. You can be with them, you can share laughs, you can even try to convince yourself that everything is fine, but deep inside, something feels off. You can't explain it logically, you just know. It's a subtle discomfort, an uneasiness that lingers, even in the happiest moments. This is because the Holy Spirit does not confirm what is not aligned with God's will. And when something is not meant for you, God will not allow you to settle into a false sense of peace. Instead, He will stir your heart, not to torment you, but to awaken you. He will allow the uneasiness to persist until you finally pay attention. Many people ignore this restlessness, thinking it's just fear, thinking it's just overthinking. But there is a difference between natural relationship challenges and spiritual unrest. Fear can be calmed with truth, but spiritual uneasiness remains even when you try to rationalize it away. You may try to suppress it, but it will always resurface. You may try to numb it, but it will only grow stronger because God is trying to protect you from something you cannot yet see. And here's the thing, God's voice is not always a loud thunder. Sometimes it's a whisper, a quiet knowing that something isn't right. And when we don't listen to that whisper, He allows situations to unfold that force us to see what we were avoiding. The arguments become more frequent, the misunderstandings become deeper, the connection begins to feel more draining than fulfilling. Not because relationships don't require work, but because what is not meant to be will never settle into harmony. This restlessness is not something to ignore. It is a sign that your spirit is trying to tell you the truth your heart may not be ready to accept. God wants you to walk in peace. He wants you to feel secure in your relationships, and when He is at the center of a connection, there is a sense of safety, of clarity, of alignment. But when He is not, there will always be a part of you that feels unsettled. So if you feel that restlessness, stop and listen. Don't rush to silence it. Pray and ask God for wisdom. And most importantly, trust that He is leading you towards something better, even if it means letting go of what you thought was right. Because when God removes peace from a relationship, it is His way of guiding you towards something that is truly meant for you. When God doesn't want you with someone, He will allow your personal growth and purpose to start moving in a different direction. You may have started out on the same page with the same vision, the same goals, even the same dreams, but over time you begin to notice a shift. What used to feel aligned now feels like a struggle. Where there was once a sense of partnership, there is now tension. Not because either of you is necessarily doing something wrong, but because your paths are no longer the same. God has a way of separating you from anything that will hinder your destiny, and sometimes that includes relationships that were once good for you but are no longer part of your calling. And if you're not careful, you may find yourself trying to force something to work when in reality it's no longer designed to. You'll begin to feel torn between what you know is right for your future and the comfort of the past. You'll find yourself having to shrink parts of who you are just to keep the relationship together. And that's not love. Love doesn't require you to stop growing. Love doesn't ask you to put your purpose on hold. God is always moving you toward the fullness of His plan, and if someone is meant to walk that path with you, they will grow with you. They will push you forward, not hold you back. They will encourage your calling, not resent it. But when you're with someone God is trying to separate you from, there will be resistance. The more you step into your purpose, the more they will try to pull you back. The more you seek clarity, the more confusion will arise. And this is where many people struggle, because it's painful to walk away from something that once felt right. But just because something was good for one season doesn't mean it's meant for the next. If God is calling you higher, but the relationship is keeping you stuck, that's a sign. If you feel like you're constantly battling between obedience to God and staying in the relationship, that's a sign. If you feel like you're growing apart rather than growing together, that's a sign. God is not the author of confusion. He will never require you to compromise your purpose to keep a relationship alive. If He is removing someone from your life, it's because He sees what's ahead. And while it may be painful in the moment, trust that He is making room for something greater, something that aligns fully with His plan for your life. When God doesn't want you with someone, one of the clearest signs is the constant presence of emotional exhaustion. It's not just about having disagreements or working through challenges. Every relationship has those. But when you're in a relationship that God is trying to remove you from, the emotional toll becomes a heavy burden. You find yourself constantly drained, walking on eggshells, or feeling like you're always trying to fix something that never seems to get better. A God-ordained relationship should bring peace, even in the midst of trials. It should be a place where you find strength, not where your strength is always being depleted. But when you're with the wrong person, it's as if your spirit knows before your mind fully understands. You start to feel uneasy. You feel weighed down, like something isn't right, even if you can't fully explain why. And that's because your spirit is picking up on what God is revealing. This relationship is not for you. You might notice that no matter how much effort you put in, the relationship just doesn't seem to flow. It feels forced. Conversations feel repetitive, like you're going in circles, never truly resolving anything. You apologize, you compromise, you try to make things work, but deep down something still feels off. That's because when God removes His peace from a relationship, it becomes a struggle just to maintain it. And here's the thing, God is not the author of struggle love. Yes, love requires effort, but it should not be a constant battle for survival. A relationship that is truly from God will not leave you feeling empty. It will not rob you of your joy. It will not leave you questioning your worth. But when you're with someone God is trying to separate you from, your spirit will feel unrested. This is where many people get stuck because they confuse attachment with love. Just because you've invested time, emotions, and energy into someone doesn't mean they're meant to stay. God will sometimes allow you to experience discomfort, to push you toward the exit He's already prepared for you, because He knows if the relationship remained easy, you might stay longer than you should. So if you find yourself emotionally exhausted, constantly questioning, and spiritually unsettled, pay attention. That is not the relationship God has for you. God's love does not leave you in turmoil. His love brings clarity. And when He removes someone, it's never to punish you, it's to protect you. Trust Him. When God doesn't want you with someone, one of the most undeniable signs is the way He removes His divine alignment from the relationship. You begin to notice that things just don't work the way they used to. Conversations that once flowed naturally now feel forced. Plans keep falling through. The connection that once seemed effortless now requires more and more energy just to maintain. It's like trying to hold on to something that is slipping through your fingers, no matter how tightly you grasp it. At first, you might think it's just a rough patch. Every relationship has challenges, right? So you convince yourself to try harder, to be more patient, to communicate better, but despite your best efforts, things don't improve. In fact, the more you try to hold on, the more things seem to break apart. That's because when God removes His favor from a relationship, no amount of human effort can restore what He has dismantled. You may notice that the timing always seems off. You want to move forward, but roadblocks keep appearing. You try to build something stable, but circumstances keep shifting. No matter how much you pray for things to work out, the relationship feels like it's in a constant state of instability. This is not a coincidence. This is God intervening. He is making it difficult because He knows if the relationship were easy, you might settle for something beneath what He has planned for you. And then something else happens. You start to feel stuck. You feel like you're no longer growing. You're no longer evolving. A relationship that once felt fulfilling now feels like it's holding you back. Your dreams, your purpose, even your relationship with God might begin to suffer. You feel spiritually disconnected, as if something is blocking your ability to hear from Him clearly. That's because when you're in a relationship God is trying to remove you from, it can create distance between you and Him. God will never give you something that competes with your relationship with Him. If being with someone is making it harder for you to seek God, harder for you to operate in your purpose, harder for you to be the best version of yourself, that's a sign you need to let go. A God-ordained relationship should enhance your spiritual journey, not hinder it. And if you're paying attention, you'll realize that the more you try to force the relationship, the more drained you become. You keep asking for clarity, but God has already spoken through the way things are unfolding. He's not going to bless something He never intended for you to have. And when you finally surrender, when you finally stop trying to hold on to what He is pulling you away from, you'll feel a peace you didn't even realize you were missing. Trust His process. Trust His plan. Because when God says no, it's always because He has something better in store. When God doesn't want you with someone, The final sign is the profound sense of peace and clarity that begins to enter your heart when you finally let go. It's a peace that transcends all understanding. You may have spent so much time in turmoil, trying to figure out why things weren't working, asking God for answers, wondering what went wrong, or blaming yourself for the relationship falling apart. But the moment you release what's not meant for you, there's a shift. A calmness settles in your spirit that you couldn't find while you were holding on. This peace comes because you've surrendered to the will of God. It's not about giving up on love or relationships. It's about trusting that the right person, the person meant for you, will come at the right time. When you're aligned with God's will, there's a deep understanding that His plan for your life is far better than any plan you could have dreamed up on your own. As you start to feel this peace, you realize that you don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to understand why things didn't work out. The peace in your heart comes from knowing that God is in control and His timing is perfect. You may have been focused on your timeline, wanting everything to happen according to your plan, but now, with this newfound peace, you start to see that His timing is not only better, but essential. He's been protecting you from something you couldn't yet see. Another aspect of this peace is a sense of relief. You've been carrying the weight of uncertainty, confusion, and even emotional pain. But when you stop trying to force what isn't meant for you, you start to feel lighter. The heaviness you've been holding on to begins to dissipate. This isn't just a fleeting feeling. It's the kind of relief that allows you to see clearly again. It's as if the fog of confusion lifts and you can now see your future more clearly without the distortion of a relationship that wasn't in line with God's purpose for you. Furthermore, when God removes someone from your life, it opens up space for the right person to come into your life. You may not see it immediately, but the release of what isn't meant for you allows God to prepare you for what is. It's about creating room for the person who will align with your destiny, the person who will walk with you in purpose, and the person who will strengthen your faith instead of pulling you away from it. God has always had a bigger plan for you, and now with this peace, you can start to feel it in your bones. Finally, when you experience this peace, you also begin to feel grateful for the lessons learned. Even though the relationship didn't work out, you can see the value in what you've gone through, the growth, the understanding of what you truly need in a partner, and the clarity of what God is calling you to become. These are priceless gifts. You might not have gained them through success or a smooth relationship, but you've gained them through the struggle, the heartbreak, and the surrender, and that makes you stronger, wiser, and more in tune with God's purpose for your life. So remember, when God doesn't want you with someone, He isn't punishing you, He's protecting you. He's setting you up for something greater than you could ever imagine. The peace you feel as you let go is a reflection of His love for you, a love that knows what's best for you even when you can't see it yet. Trust in His plan, trust in His timing, and embrace the peace that comes from knowing you are exactly where you need to be.